In this video, we'll give you the top waiver wire players to target heading into Week 10, along with our top reactions to Week 9. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino of RotoWire. Anthony, waivers, one quarterback. If you're in a super flex league, Dak Prescott leaves the Week 9 game with a hamstring injury, and Cooper Rush takes over. We don't know what CeeDee Lamb's status is. Certainly, is he hurt a shoulder? MRI set for him. But again, super flex leagues, all quarterbacks have value. Thoughts on Cooper Rush?
He's a solid player. We saw Cooper Rush a few years ago play a few games with Dak Prescott, and he was serviceable. You significantly, obviously, downgrade Cooper Rush if CeeDee Lamb misses time. But in a super flex league, you're right, he's going to have some value.
Yeah, there's no running backs. I'm going to throw a couple out there. One didn't even play last week. Keaton Mitchell practiced in full last week, which means he could be closer to a return. If you happen to be in a league where he is available, he could immediately leapfrog Justice Hill for that number 2 role. And we know how explosive Keaton Mitchell is. Even if he gets 5 to 7 touches a game, and Derrick Henry only plays about half the snaps. So there are snaps to be had. Thoughts on Keaton Mitchell?
I like Keaton Mitchell a lot. And remember how explosive and productive he was last season. The issue is the injury volatility. My biggest question of adding Keaton Mitchell, is there enough room for 3 running backs to operate? Because I just don't know if he's going to unseat Justice Hill, because he's really impactful in this offense right now.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But just, you know what? When I saw Keaton Mitchell play last year, we saw it. We just saw this. He's special. He's special. And the Ravens we got a minute on this. I think this is important discussion. Well, we'll talk about the Ravens later. Let's talk about them later. We'll cover them later. So I guess we'll table that for now. Let's get back. One more running back to talk about. Again, he's a number 3 in the offense, but Ray Davis. And Ray Davis is averaging 6 touches only over the last 3 games. The whole point is this: stash him if he's out there, because if James Cook somehow misses time, it's a problem for him. And if he does that, Ray Davis, we saw in that Jets game, and the Jets were a terrible run defense, but he's a player that would immediately be a strong fantasy starter. Anything on Ray Davis?
Yeah, I like Ray Davis a lot, and he's not getting a lot of reps, and he's even being outsnapped by Ty Johnson. But we are starting to see the player we were buying into this offseason. And when he's on the field, if you look at the metrics, he is being used, especially a receiver. He's actually being targeted going into yesterday, 28.2% of the routes he is running. He's explosive. He has a 21% broken tackle rate. So it's all there. It's just a matter of if he's going to get extended opportunity. If he does, then we use him as a standalone flex play. But at least right now, you absolutely stash him, because if James Cook goes down, I think we're going to see an unleashed Ray Davis in an offense that's starting to click.
And that Buffalo offensive line has been very, very good. And again, no Amari Cooper yesterday, and we saw it. That offense wasn't as explosive without him on the field. Again, I talk about it every week, but teams have to play you differently when you have an alpha that can win on multiple levels. And as soon as he wasn't in there, everything kind of clammed up. They scored points. I understand that, but this was not an explosive offense from everybody out there. All right, wide receivers. Yes, DeMarcus Robinson, and he has a pair of 2 touchdown games in a row. But what I point out is real simply this. Since last year, like week 12 or so, whenever Kupp or Nakua or both are on the field, Robinson is an afterthought to opposing defenses. And since last year, he had 44 or more yards in every game since he started in the line. There was one game he had a 0. It was that week 18 game. They didn't play anybody. So that game doesn't even count. And nobody used him for fantasy anyway that week. But this year, first 2 games, right around that 40, 50-yard mark. The only game he didn't hit that yards was last week when he had 2 touchdowns, 2 more this week. Again, DeMarcus Robinson is a decent flex play with touchdown upside. Anthony?
Yeah, it's wild, because I bought into DeMarcus Robinson when he ascended into the wide receiver 1 role, and I wasn't thinking about that what you had said about, well, he's a really good number 3. He's not a good number 1 or 2, and this is now on display. I like DeMarcus Robinson. I think we could use him, like you said, in a flex role, even if Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are both on the field. He's going to have a role, because we know the enemy defense, they're going to try to minimize what these other 2 receivers can do, which leaves DeMarcus Robinson open in money situations, as we are now seeing in weeks 8 and 9.
Well, and Sean McVay dials of special plays, because when teams, he realized he wants to set everybody up. And when teams are getting too comfortable, like sinking in on Kupp and Nakua, he uses Demarcus Robinson a little more downfield to, again, keep everybody honest. It's a great setup they have. As long as Matt Stafford's slinging it, it all works out well. Parker Washington, again, primary slot receiver for the Jaguars. We know Christian Kirk's done for the year. Washington does catch 3 passes for 41 yards. Now, there was hardly any passing production at all in that game for the Jags. I also want to caution people. Christian Kirk wasn't doing much of anything in this offense. So if you think Parker Washington's going to come in and go crazy, that's probably a bad thought. But if you're in a deeper league, he still should get a few targets a week. Anthony?
Yeah, he's a decent floor play, not somebody I'm thrilled to use. You get Minnesota this week, and on paper, it looked like a good matchup. But I think we saw again last night, on paper doesn't always correlate to what you're going to get, because Jacksonville, I would say that they're a downgrade of what Indy puts on the field, and Minnesota ate Indy up. And I think, look at Parker Washington next week. You might want to use him, but I would pump the brakes.
We got Charlene in the house. Welcome aboard, Charlene. Nice to see you. Nick Westbrook-Akine. I know. Touchdowns in 4 straight games, unsustainable. Totally get it. Here's what I want to point out, though. DeAndre Hopkins got traded. Treylon Burks, week 7, they put him on IR, so he could come back in a couple weeks. But in the last 2 games, Westbrook-Akine has played 92 and 97% of the snaps. He's seen 4 and 6 targets, yardage 39 and 50. Again, scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. Mason Rudolph, I imagine Will Levis we're going to remain hurt for a long time because they probably don't want him on the field. And it's clear that Mason Rudolph does like him. Again, I don't think you're ever running and jumping and shouting, saying, I'm starting Nick Westbrook-Akine this week. But in this current situation with the snap share, the targets, and the touchdowns, he's probably worth a flyer. Anthony?
Yeah, it's almost like they're using him in the red zone, almost like I don't want to say a tight end, but he's getting a lot of red zone targets. I don't have the total tally from yesterday, but going into yesterday, in the past 3 games with the touchdown streak, he's at a total of 5 red zone targets, including 3 inside the 5-yard line. And outside of the Chargers this week, there's a nice run of good wide receiver matchups. I get this is not a high volume passing attack. I get it's Mason Rudolph, but somebody has to catch the football.
Just on a side note, very weird yesterday. Tyler Boyd did come in with a shoulder injury. He played, but he only played 29% of the snaps and wasn't targeted. I assume it was the shoulder injury, and I don't know that it impacts Westbrook-Akine because they don't play the same position. Like, we have a slot receiver and an outside receiver. But I'm not sure what's going on with Tyler Boyd, but if there's an issue there, again, even though Westbrook-Akine is an outside guy, it could mean more targets. So pay attention to that as well. Jalen Coker's next, at least 30 yards in 3 straight games. Look, he's not going to be putting up big yards every week. He had the garbage time production 2 weeks ago against Denver when the defense basically quit, and that was fine. But otherwise, you got Bryce Young, a quarterback. There's going to be a very big limitation on passing yards. But again, Coker, especially if Andy Dalton comes back, his value could increase a bit. Thoughts on Coker?
Yeah, he was a big-time polarizing player going into this week, and he did not live up to expectations. A lot of it, I do think, is because of the quarterback situation going on. I like him more with Andy Dalton. Can we interject here is that Adam Thielen is going to be back on the field soon. And that is, and this is one of those type of players you look on your waiver wire. Maybe he's not stashed on an IR. Maybe your league doesn't have IR and Adam Thielen's sitting there. Adam Thielen has an increased value with Bryce Young if we go back to last season. So he would be the one with Bryce Young I'm prioritizing.
I wonder if there's going to be any type of a trade market for Adam Thielen. Somebody dumping like a 7th round pick for him in the next day or so. Maybe not. I mean, we kind of know he's somewhat washed, but he's had games, even this year. I mean, he had a 3 for 40 and a touchdown, a 3 for 49, not great, but that was with Bryce Young. And so I wonder if somebody trades for him. It'll be interesting to see. Trade deadlines tomorrow. And yes, the Cowboys. Anthony, you love to see this on the screen. Anthony's a big Cowboys fan. Oh my gosh, that's rough. That's rough. After the waivers, we can talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about 2 more receivers. Covante Turpin, 3 for 36. CeeDee Lamb goes down late with a shoulder injury. If Lamb misses time, Turpin may be the most explosive remaining player they have. So he could see a expanded role. But again, if Dak Prescott misses time, that kind of throws water on that. What do you got on Turpin?
Turpin's a nice player. He's obviously the big play guy. He's a return man. There's just a lot of question marks with Dallas right now. Are we going to see Dak? Are we going to see CD? Brandon Cooks is also eligible to come back. So I think with Cooks returning, that might push down Turpin. And Turpin's more, yeah, maybe he gets those spike weeks if that's going to come on 2 or 3 targets in a big play. That's how I see Turpin right now.
Last one, Drake London again gets he's another one. We talked about Chris Olave. He's been knocked out of 2 games in the first quarter. Anthony, you brought up the Derek Carr throwing medicine balls, and that's an issue. But Drake London, he's got knocked silly in a couple games this year early as well. This game he didn't come back. This week it was different. It was his hip. He caught a touchdown. He landed on his hip. Didn't come back. So fortunately, he scored a fantasy, touchdown for his fantasy managers. But anyway, Kaderil Hodge. He came in. He's the direct replacement for London. Now, he did very little looks, but he plays the snaps. And at the end of the day, if they end up trailing in a game and they have to throw, unlike yesterday when they were boat racing the Cowboys, the score was closer than it really was. Anyway, Hodge, if London misses time, could have value. Anything on Kaderil Hodge?
Yeah, we haven't seen much of this player. He obviously had that walk-off overtime touchdown a few weeks ago against Tampa Bay. But with the increased role, if London misses time, if you need an ad, I get it. He reminds me of an Xavier Hutchinson where, yeah, it's worth picking him up. Don't use him. Let's see what happens. And obviously it didn't work out with Hutchinson, and I don't know how it's going to work with Kaderil Hodge. This is a loaded offense where we still have Ray McLeod, Mooney, and Kyle Pitts.
All right, before we get to tight ends, Tyler's asking any news on AJ Brown. The latest news is that he's okay. He's getting an MRI, and he looked pretty spry on the sideline after the game. So I don't know if it was a scare. They certainly ended up maybe needing him. They were first winning by a blowout. We'll talk about this game later, but maybe they just shelved him for the day, saying we don't need you, which I guess they technically didn't, although they almost blew the game. But he's supposedly fine. My guess off of that worst case scenario is he misses a game, but it sounds like today with no imaging known, he could play next week. And then like Charlene points out about the Cowboys, yeah, they're 0-3 at home. They're 3-5 on the season, minus 54 point differential. Should they be sellers at the trade deadline, Anthony?
Apparently, Jerry said they might be buyers.
Of course they are.
That's what Jerry is hinting.
Don't spend a penny in free agency.
I mean, yeah,
all the running backs out there. We don't need them. Offensive linemen, don't need them. But let's be buyers in free agency. Go ahead.
But I was watching Tony Pollard play yesterday. We had Tony Pollard. We drafted Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard right now is one of the better running backs in the NFL. You let him go to what? Rico Dowdle and Zeke? And Zeke's deactivated, might get cut. Dalvin Cook could have had Derrick Henry. Could have had a lot of guys.
My God.
And now you want to be a buyer? What are you going to get? Donta Foreman, who you also could have had at free agency? What are you going to do? What are we doing?
Come on, Jerry was all in. It's offseason. I don't know what he was all in. It certainly wasn't in the roster construction. Oh, my goodness. Charlene, you bring up Kyler Murray. I don't know if we're going to talk about the Bears. Let me just see if we have that in our notes. I don't think we're going to talk about that. So, yeah, he didn't have to throw the ball. And so you can't take anything away from Kyler Murray's game yesterday because they ran the ball down the Bears' throats. And the Bears don't have a good run defense. And James Conner roasted them. Dean Mercado, Benson, they went off on the ground. They led. They blew them out. Didn't have to throw. You can't hold that against Marvin Harrison. So, basically, in terms of that game, fortunately, Trey McBride rushed in a touchdown because he would have done nothing. But again, it wasn't their fault. There was that. We're going to talk about this game in a minute, Harry, but Waddle or Hopkins for Tillman. Oh, well, look, Waddle's got to go. I mean, he got the touchdown yesterday, and then there was like a garbage play at the end where they were laddering the ball around, and they considered it like a minus 20-yard reception for Waddle because it was weird. It should have been running. That should have been a rushing attempt at that point because he didn't catch the ball. So I don't know if they're going to do a stat adjustment on that or we're going to keep counting as it a catch, but he didn't make the catch. They lateral and he ran backwards and got tackled. But look, at this point, I don't know how you play Waddle. I have no idea how you play Waddle. I mean, for Tillman, that's an easy one, right, Anthony?
Yes, and it wouldn't be both. Like I wouldn't flip Waddle and Hopkins. I would rather keep Hopkins rest of season. In that
Oh
Kansas
yeah.
City passing attack, and I think it starts tonight for DeAndre Hopkins. Like one of my bets I'm making, I think he finds the end zone. This is a great matchup.
Yeah, I just went right to Waddle. I did, yeah, like you said, I wasn't even going to entertain
Yeah,
Hopkins because Hopkins is in a great spot here. Defense has got to play the run against Kansas City because they're just going to load up people. Now they lost another tight end, Jared Wiley, I believe he got an ACL injury, but then they had Peyton Hendershot on the
yeah.
practice. So they brought him up. So they just need bodies in there. They keep throwing bodies at people. So and they're going to Pacheco. They're saying late November. So we're
Yeah.
looking a few more weeks. That injury ended up longer than expected. We're looking at what, a 10, 11 week injury maybe by the time it's done.
There was initially week 10, but that's not. I never thought that was realistic.
Yeah, so we'll see how that works out. And yeah, what else before we go in? And yes, Jennifer, the Saints fans are happy. They still have Derek Carr though, and so but yeah, Dennis Allen needed to go a long time ago,
Yeah.
and he didn't. And I don't know what this franchise is gonna do. Their wide receiver room is a mess. I mean, Chris Olave, second concussion in a month, took him to the hospital. He said he's fine, but who knows? Bub Means, the rookie, was doing a little bit, and he obviously is on the injured reserve. And we know Shaheed's done for the season. And then their running backs, after they were doing, I think Kendre Miller's on the IR and Jamal Williams missed a game. And so I called Taysom Hill for, and it wasn't a great thought, but yeah, I thought he was a good play. He ends up getting a touchdown. But yeah, I mean, that said, this organization, I don't know what they do from here. Anthony?
And this is a team that's year after year in salary cap, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And we just talked about it off air. You're giving Alvin Kamara a contract extension when he's not part of your future. He's not going to help you win a Super Bowl, which is at this juncture of his career. That's what he should be looking for, not staying in New Orleans, winning 3 games and getting beat up.
100%. 100%. Chris, yeah, we're gonna talk about a few of those good games. Let's get through the tight ends. We'll talk about some of those games. And Charlene, we are definitely covering the Rams game, so we'll be getting to that one pretty soon. Let's finish out the waivers, and then we'll get to some of these reactions to these games. Tight ends. If Taysom Hill is out there, he had missed 3 games with injury, so it's possible. He fell into the waiver wire. He's had 10 opportunities to touch the ball in each of the last 2 games. Gets about 5 rushes, gets about 4 targets. Usually gets a pass attempt. Not that that's done much, but again, with the Saints dealing with injuries, they may need Taysom Hill more than ever. Coaching change shouldn't matter. I mean, obviously they need him, and they don't have much else. Anthony, Taysom Hill.
Yeah, if he is tight end eligible, you're picking him up. We know the way they use him. And this is like a skeleton crew at wide receiver. The running back room's a little bit iffy too, with Kendre Miller in and out. But, speaking of, I know I want to scale back to Kendre Miller. With Dennis Allen out of the mix, does this help Kendre? I'll just throw that in there.
If he wasn't an IR, it sure would.
Oh,
missed 3 more games.
Well, there goes that.
I know, but I thought the same thing, but they put him on the IR. I think that was like Dennis Allen's parting shot, knowing he'd get fired. Amazing. We lost to the Panthers. Jatavian Sanders, speaking of the Panthers, at least 5 targets and 49 yards in 3 of the last 4 games. Look, it's lazy analysis to say, young quarterbacks lean on the tight end. It just may be working out this way that Sanders is a big presence in the middle of the field, sometimes the most comfortable place to throw. He is talented, but the production hasn't been bad. I mean, you're not starting as a tight end 1, but again, depending on the depth of your league, you might look at him. Anthony?
Yeah, this is a player who's had at least 5 targets in every game since week 5. So there's enough volume, especially at the volatile tight end position, where we can use him in our fantasy lineups. 9.9 PPR points in 3 out of his last 4, including 2 over 12. That's solid when we have some good tight ends not giving us anything.
Now, the next one, I was all over this in the Start Sit show yesterday. I pointed out that Mike Gesicki has big games when wide receiver T. Higgins is out. I think we talked about this as well, Anthony.
Yeah.
He's a big slot, basically. And he didn't play a ton of snaps, but when he's on there, they use him as a downfield option. And obviously the focus on Jamar Chase. Well, Gesicki did it again. He had 73 yards last week. He had 2 touchdowns and 100 yards this week. One of the touchdowns late. So what? Counts for fantasy. If T. Higgins misses another game, Gesicki is a player you want to stuff in your lineup for a week. But I think once Higgins is back, Gesicki's done very little when Higgins has been on the field. Anything there?
Yeah, Gesicki's been a monster without Higgins this year. Even scaling back to week 2, he had 7 from 91. So he's
Mhm.
now had 3 games over 73 yards. He's finding the end zone. What's crazy to me is that they're not using him more, even with T. Higgins on the field, because he's such a good weapon. And we're starting to see him emerge. Is there a possibility where he earns more snaps? Or
They
is he
play
so
all those
limited
tight
as a
ends,
runner?
Anthony. It's
Right.
it's they play like Eric All got hurt, then they went right to Drew Sample. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Their tight end usage is weird. But you're right. You'd like to think he'd get a bigger role, but they have these multifaceted roles for their tight ends, and they know Gesicki can't block. They like their tight
Yeah.
ends to block too, so he only plays about 35% of the snaps.
Yeah.
I think because of his lack of blocking ability, they just don't value that. It's a good call on that. What else? Oh, and also you talk about the games that he played in week 1. The thing that gets lost in the box score, Gesicki had a touchdown that game.
Yes.
It was.
Yep.
I thought the overturn was. It was soft. I thought it was a catch,
Yep.
but maybe it wasn't. But in that game, he would have had a touchdown too. So it would have been every game he cashed, but little replay official got him on that one. Couple more. Jonnu Smith, he had more targets yesterday than Tyreek Hill. Way to go. We're going to talk about that game in a minute, so I'm not going to dwell on that right now. But anyway, Jonnu Smith, 12 targets total over the last 2 games since Tua Tagovailoa came back. In the last 3 games, Jonnu Smith's averaging 54 yards. In the preseason, Mike McDaniel said he wanted to weaponize him. Apparently, he wants to weaponize him more than Tyreek Hill. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, this is now you bring up the 6 targets in 2 straight with Tua. Even going to the games without Tua, gets a different quarterback. He's now had 6+ targets in 4 straight and in 5 total games this season. So Jonnu Smith does have a role in this offense. And I feel like, the fact that he's available in so many leagues, he's a under the radar tight end stash that I think we can use. Now, the rest of season matchup, at least for the playoffs, weeks 14 to 17, they're not good. But in the next 4 games, Rams, Raiders, Patriots, Green Bay, they're all exploitable matchups. So I think if you need a tight end, you pick him up, and I think you can use him for the next 4 games as long as the usage is maintained.
I'll be coming back to this rant momentarily, but for now, if you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings by getting a free 2-day trial, no credit card needed. Head on over to rotowire.com/Jim. You can check out our content. If you like it, we'd love if you join the team. If not, we're just happy you took a look and stopped by. All right, let's get to some reactions here. Reaction number 1. The Bills top the Dolphins 30-27 on a 61-yard field goal by Tyler Bass with about 5 seconds left. Great kick. It's been the year of the long field goal, Anthony. Let's start, before I go crazy talking about the Dolphins, let's give the Bills their due. This game was very conservative in the first half. It was a lower scoring game. Everything was kind of close to the vest. Second half kind of went crazy. I pointed this out since Amari Cooper got there. He didn't play yesterday. But I said, it's the minute he got there, even though he only played partial snaps in 2 games, defenses played him very differently. They couldn't pack it all in on him anymore. And all of a sudden, we saw that offense exploding. Well, Cooper's not on the field. And all of a sudden, guess what? Keon Coleman, 1 for 21 on 2 targets. Khalil Shakir does what he does. Slot corner and the safety were out for Miami, so he goes 6 for 50 on 7. But even Dalton Kincaid, 4 for 32 on 10 targets. So without having Cooper on the field, that passing attack is not great. Allen throws for 235, but he gets 3 touchdowns. For fantasy, it's great. But again, it's a massive difference with or without Cooper. Even James Cook, 10 for 44. It's fine, but the explosive plays weren't there. Ray Davis gets the screen for the long touchdown, greatly blocked, not looked for the defense. But again, it was a lot of stagnation, Anthony.
Yeah, outside of that, if you take away that big Ray Davis play that went 63 yards, all their other pass catchers had under 50 yards receiving. That includes Khalil Shakir, who also had 6 receptions. So this is a limited offense without Amari Cooper. Focusing more on Miami, this was the best game we've seen Tua play, in my opinion, in his career against the Buffalo Bills. He normally struggles. He goes for 231 and 2 touchdowns. Miami should have won this game. They gave this game away, and I think a lot of it, I know you want to go on this rant, has to do with Tyreek Hill and, 5 targets. This player was in the conversation for NFL Offensive Player of the Year, possibly MVP last year, on track for 2,000 yards. You give him 5 targets in a game where you had to have, and in a game where this is a team that has owned you since Josh Allen has taken over.
So Miami side, like you're saying. So we love to call coaches geniuses. And we were real quick to think about giving Mike McDaniel a genius tag his first year when he had this offense going insane. He get 1,700 yards out of Tyreek Hill. That was the year we had 1,300 out of Jalen Waddle, and it was looking like a thing of beauty. But we did notice Tua got hurt a little bit, but they also, defenses caught up with them in the second half of that year, and it slowed down a little bit. And then last year, in the beginning of the year, all of a sudden, McDaniel comes back with that half-field motion that he was using that re-unlocked Tyreek Hill. And so that's my definition of the genius. So you might have a great idea, but what's your counterpunch? And he had a great counterpunch. But then that one got figured out midseason. Everybody started using that same concept. So everybody was practicing his defense in practice. So it didn't work. Well, that was his only changeup. Mike McDaniel has not come back with another pitch since. So Mike McDaniel had a good idea and one modification, but he has no clue how to beat. He's not smarter than the defensive coaches right now because they're beating him at his own game. And it's not just Sean McDermott. It's a lot of teams. And even Tua, 25 of 28. All right, great. You threw for 231 yards. Beautiful. It's not moving the needle. Like you said, it's, when you have Jonnu Smith with 46 yards, and Odell Beckham has more targets than Jalen Waddle. How you're not getting Waddle involved. There's a coaching problem. In Tyreek Hill 2 weeks in a row, his production was in the second half. Like nothing in the first half. I'm sorry. I should say the opposite. He had 69 yards in the first half against Arizona. Then he disappeared in the second half. This week, did very little in the first half. And then when they were trying to chase points, he did something there. You said this before show, Anthony. It's a Devon Achane offense. And in theory, it's cool. Yeah. But this offense is never going to win games against good teams if it's a Devon Achane offense. If it's a Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle offense, then Achane eats because you've stretched the defense out. I don't know how Mike McDaniel doesn't figure this out, but apparently in my mind, he's a fake sharp at this point.
Yeah, I do feel like Mike McDaniel has been figured out. He's a little bit overrated. I think, this team, at least from the front office wise, they were mismanaged this offseason, not bringing in a better quality backup. I think that right there is where the issue begins at, when you see Flacco and Winston available, how are you going into this season with the guys you have? So there's a lot wrong here with Miami. And I think, if this season doesn't turn around, Mike McDaniel is not going to be retained.
No. And here's the thing. They just paid Tyreek, right? I think they paid him. He's 30 years old and he's not on the upswing anymore. And I think they paid, did they pay Waddle too?
They did.
They paid Waddle. And that's how you're going to use them. And I don't know who's going to come in, but if they're going to do it, they better bring in somebody from the Shanahan tree. And I know that McDaniel was, but you got to bring somebody else from the Shanahan tree in. You got to bring in somebody that's going to go heavy sets and throw deep out of that. And I know Tua is a problem because if he takes a shot to the head, it could be it. But they've got to figure something out. But it's not working. It is not working right now. Like you said, they can't retain him because at this point, you paid everybody. All the players are paid. They're there. You're stuck with them.
For a team like this that's in theory on paper built to win, Ben Johnson's the name. That's the hot ticket from Detroit. Wherever he goes, and if I'm him, I'm not going to a reclamation project. I'm looking at a team like Miami if that job opens up.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I like that call. Oh, man, that would be great. That would be a great call.
They don't have a David Montgomery. Mostert's older, but they have enough of the weapons in the back. They have a little bit of everything. The only thing they're missing is that Montgomery and obviously the strong offensive line when it comes to Detroit.
Oh, they got the pieces. You're just missing an elite offensive line. That's funny, dude. Oh, man. Yeah, anybody would want that line side. You know what? Real quick on Ben Johnson, though. He's another one. We don't really know what he is. He has developed a great middle-of-the-field passing game with one of the better middle-of-the-field passers in the game with two outstanding middle-of-the-field weapons with an elite line and a running game. I know he's done great with what he's had, but if he goes to a team and he doesn't have Amon-Ra St. Brown and he doesn't have Sam Laporta and he doesn't have that offensive line, do we really know what Ben Johnson is?
But that's why I'm saying go to a team that has weapons like Miami. At least you have something to work with.
It's very different weapons, but I get what you're saying. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's just very different.
Right? Like, don't go to Oakland. Don't go to Vegas. I want to go to Vegas because then you're really cooked.
No. Trying to think of where he could go. That's
at least he can fool people in Miami for a little bit.
Right? Seattle. If they let go of Ryan Grubb and they fire Mike McDonald, I don't know if they will. Anyway.
Chicago.
Oh, you know what? Yes, they don't have the offensive line, but oh my gosh. Chicago. Ben Johnson in Chicago? You know what? That's not a bad call. Wow. All right. Reaction number 2. Charlene mentioned Miami doesn't like cold weather. You know what, Charlene? I don't think they like warm weather this year either. They're not doing really good anywhere. They're not doing real well these days. All right. What we got next? Reaction number 2. The Eagles almost blow a lead to the Jaguars. They hang on by a thread, 28-23. Anthony, I have seen the tush push fail on a number of occasions this year. It's no longer that 94% success play. It's probably more like a 67, 68% play right now, and teams are able to defend it. Jason Kelce being gone at center, to me, that's the issue. At some point, this is going to hurt them. They miss some important plays by not being able to convert that. Just hand the ball to Saquon Barkley. You don't have to get your quarterback 15 rushing touchdowns. He doesn't have the center to do it anymore. Saquon Barkley is probably your best option. I think the tush push can be used situationally against teams with a really small front. Like, let's say you're playing a Denver Broncos team where everybody's light on the front. Yeah, you could get away with that. But if you're playing teams that could really beef up the front, I think they need to scrap it. What do you think?
Yeah, I got into some heated arguments about the Jason Kelce impact, and we're starting to see it play out. You have Saquon. It's a no-brainer. Like, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. This is the best offensive line he's operated with. Hand the ball off to Saquon. It's not hard. Find ways to be creative. I don't know what the answer is, but the tush push is no longer the answer. It is no longer 100%. And if I'm, teams are prepared for it now, and they know Kelce isn't there.
Right. I mean, last year they did a fake off it, and I thought they should have always been planning it in. Go line up tush push and then motion somebody. Do something different. Spice it up. And again, a pitch to Saquon, a screen to a tight end. Something, spice it up, but it probably needs to go. And before I get to the Eagles, I gotta circle back on this. I have a question about the Bears. Yes, the Bears line is an issue. It's coaching. And I know they lost another tackle yesterday. It's coaching. They cannot pick up a simulated pressure to save their lives. All these other coaches, Cliff Kingsbury has his line picking them up. All these rookie quarterbacks that are doing well. Their coaches have taught their offensive lines to pick up simulated pressures, and they're putting their rookie quarterbacks in good situations. Yeah, the Bears don't have a great line, but they are not coached well. It is a coaching failure across the board. Matt Eberflus, this defensive guy, you can't stop the run. Well, what good are you at this point? Shane Waldron, he's probably the biggest problem. Making things as difficult as possible for Caleb Williams. All you do is blitz them. You just blitz the Bears. That's the ticket. Simulated pressure and blitz. You do those two things against the Bears, their line can't figure it out. They're not coached up to handle it. And these are handleable things. These are things that all the teams are doing now. So it's just typical. I live in Chicago, born and raised here. Typical Chicago. They never hire sharp football people. Ryan Pace looked like a good GM for a while. Maybe you can put him in the sharp bucket. But for the most part, Chicago has not hired sharp football people. They lucked into Buddy Ryan. That's their Super Bowl. It wasn't Mike Ditka, but everybody talks Ditka. It was Buddy Ryan. Anyway, Anthony, I'll shut up. Anything on Chicago before I get back to this game?
This is an offensive league. You have a young offensive team. When you look at the pieces, you need an offensive-minded head coach.
Yes.
I don't know who that is. I don't know what the answer is. I think Eberflus would be fine coaching a defense. When Shane I remember that clip from like Jackson Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf last year talking about Shane Waldron, and it wasn't good. And now he's in Chicago, and you're expecting, I feel like we're looking at Seattle light right now.
The Shane Waldron.
Top to bottom.
So was it Smith and Jigba who was asked about Shane Waldron, and they said, "Can you tell us about Shane Waldron?" He goes, "Is the mic live?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Yes." He goes, "He's a nice guy."
Yep.
Oh, that told us all we needed to go because he had a lot he wanted to say. Wasn't able. All right, back to what we were talking about, the Eagles. The Eagles almost blow this lead. We talked about the tush push. Saquon Barkley. If you didn't see the game, get the highlight of Barkley's run. There was a run where he jumped backwards over a defender. The only way he can get past that defender, he notices the defender, sees the defender coming in low, he jumps backwards, lands on his feet, and gets a few more yards. There were a number of other things on that play. I mean, I'm not going to sell this well at all. Google Saquon Barkley run from yesterday, and you have to watch this run. He is a special athlete. There are very few running backs that could do some of the things that Saquon Barkley does. It is so exciting to see him unlocked from New York. But Saquon Barkley is a joy to watch. Anthony?
Yeah, that play is phenomenal. It's all over Twitter. If you have a Twitter account, it's probably on Facebook. It's on TikTok. You're not going to miss it. But that's even more of a reason, scaling back to the tush push conversation. Saquon Barkley is that special of a player. You can't figure out other plays besides a tush push to get this guy more involved. Not to mention, you have guys like, I get he's hurt. You have Goddard, Devonta. You have A.J. Brown. You have a loaded offense. You need to be more creative to get these guys involved in short yardage situations.
Now, what I didn't like about the Eagles, they keep going for two, and they were missing. I think they tried to tush push one. They didn't get it. They missed some 2-point conversions. So they left points on the table. And then there was Barkley. Pretty sure the replay showed he got hit. He goes there, barely touched, but he got hit. They call it a fumble. They review it. They give a touchdown to Trevon Walker. That flipped the game. And then all of a sudden, it's like the Eagles panicked. And Trevor Lawrence runs in 2 touchdowns. They're not passing for much yards, 169 passing yards. Weren't doing much, but all of a sudden they got some momentum. And then the Eagles kind of like felt the opposite end of that momentum. Fortunately, they hung on to one, but it was a late interception. Nakobe Dean made a real nice play in the end zone, but it was to the point where it was really close, where the Eagles were going to blow. I think it was a 23-0 lead, if I remember correctly. I had called them -7. I feel bad we lost that bet on that game, but man, it looked like that was money in the bank. But that's in the NFL. You can never bank anything until there's zeros all on that clock. But all that said, it was a lesson learned for the Eagles, and hopefully they're able to pocket this lesson. The lesson of you've got to play 4 quarters to win. You can't take your foot off the gas. And I don't know what AJ Brown's real status is. They said he's fine. They're going to do imaging. But if he could have gone back in, if he could have, and if he was fine, they needed him on the field. They don't have that offense won't be the same. And they were great with Barkley. Barkley, 199 yards. But you put your foot on the gas. Now, if he was hurt, then fine. He stays out and we get it. Devontae Smith did fine. Beautiful catch in the back of the end zone, navigating in there. But it's just this Eagles team. They have gotten much, much better as the season's gone on. They're 6-2 now. And honestly, the way they're playing, and if they could get the offense continuing moving forward, they could be a threat for the NFC by the end of the year. Anthony?
Yeah, the defense is starting to improve. It was a little bit horrific early this season, but it's starting to gel. My biggest worry is what version of the offense are we going to get? This offense looks unstoppable sometimes, and then this offense looks like it can't get out of its own way at times. And I think a big part, the times when they're struggling, Saquon's not getting enough touches. So as long as you keep feeding Saquon Barkley, he had 30 touches. I get, he's a little bit older, but you didn't sign him because he doesn't have these games in him. If you're chasing a Super Bowl, Saquon Barkley should probably be just as much of a focal point as A.J. Brown.
100%. Yes. I mean, you think back to and then some of you might be younger, but those old Dallas Cowboy days, you had Aikman, you had Smith, and you had Michael Irvin. This is what you got to do here. You roll your 3. And I know Devontae Smith's better than the Alvin Harper that the Cowboys had, but that's fine. But you had Dallas Goddard, your Jay Novacek. It's kind of, you can kind of pull that thing. And you had the great offensive line.
Yeah.
It's kind of a system that you can it's a different day and age, but it would work. real quick on the Jaguars, I did tell people to recommend benching Bigsby yesterday. I didn't like the matchup. Just Philly is tough against run. They just traded away their left tackle, Jacksonville, Cam Robinson. They traded him away to Minnesota last week. Did not like it. They split that backfield up. Bigsby does get 52% of the snaps, leads and carries 8 for 22, no targets. ETN, 31%, 3 carries, 3 targets, actually beat Bigsby and PPR, but 2.2. I guess anybody could beat 2.2 PPR points. So there's that. Dearness Johnson, 24% of the snaps. He gets 2 carries. It's a mess. Now, Brian Thomas, give him a pass. This was a bad matchup, but he was hurt. He wasn't 100%. He did play 91% of the snaps, but it wasn't going to be a good matchup. Evan Ingram, 5 for 45. You'll take that. Real quick on the Jaguars.
This team is a mess. We're starting to see coaches get fired. It would not shock me if Doug Peterson and Press Taylor are next. But, you have too many talented players on this offense for it to be struggling the way it has.
Let's go to reaction number 3. Did the Broncos get exposed? They lose 41-10 to the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Now, this is one of my favorite bets of the week. 9.5 didn't seem like a problem to me. Here is the whole premise behind it. I love Denver. Denver's defense is great. They blitz. They have a lot of guys that can get to the passer, but they're undersized. And they have very good outside corners. But you only play man about 30% of the time. Everybody in the league, they're playing zone most of the time. So you even saw it. Zay Flowers on plays they were in zone. We get in the zone and crush them because your great corners are passing people off when you're playing zone. So teams that play the most zone are 40%. So you're in zone a lot. So those great corners, I think they should just play man and then use the rush. But the whole point was this, Anthony. Those light guys up front, I go, they're not stopping this run game. They're going to get bullied. But this defense is going to get bullied all over the field. And Derrick Henry, 23 for 106 doesn't sound great, but he did his job. Patrick Ricard, the fullback, played a season high 63% of the times because part of the thing, get the big man to beat up those little guys. And that's exactly what they did. Zay Flowers crushed him in zone, like I said. Henry had his game, a couple of touchdowns. Lamar didn't really run, 16-19 for 280, just shredded him every which way. They didn't need Mark Andrews, so it wasn't a bad game for him. For fantasy it was, but they only threw 19 passes. So this is the A-League. You got the Chiefs, maybe the Bills, and definitely the Ravens. This is the A-League. And Denver's not in the A-League. Anthony?
No, and Denver, if you look at their schedule since they started winning in week 3, Tampa was their most impressive win. And in my opinion, I think the Jets lost that 10-9 game rather than Denver winning it. They beat Oakland. They lost to the Chargers, who was one of the more talented teams they played during that stretch. And then they beat New Orleans and Carolina. Baltimore, they ran into a buzzsaw. They don't have the talent to keep up with the Baltimore Ravens offensively. They don't have the personnel to stop them defensively. So I did not think it was going to be this much of a blowout, but I certainly thought it was going to be a 14-point win yesterday. I think if you were on Denver, you were on the David and Goliath, you were on the David side because you want to see the David win these games. But when you don't have the matchup, you don't have the personnel to match up, this is what happens.
Bo Nix is a fine fantasy quarterback. Bo Nix has a lot of work if he's going to be an NFL producer. Now, people are going to get hot about me saying that, but you kind of saw it yesterday. Now, the one thing is the Ravens are terrible against the pass. They're horrific against the pass. They may be a bottom 4 unit against the pass. So 19 for 33, 233, no touchdowns for the year. He almost had a garbage time one late, didn't get it. Bo Nix did catch a touchdown. He did fine for fantasy for you. But in a game like this, here's the whole thing. Denver wants to run the ball. And Javonte Williams had one great big run. He had one big reception. But otherwise, the rushing game didn't get going because Baltimore could stop the run without committing bodies. And here's the problem for Denver. If they don't get going, and they had an easy schedule much of the way, and so they were able to benefit and feast on that. But if they can't run the ball and Bo Nix has to carry them through the air, and again, this is a terrible Ravens pass defense, and he could only come up with 223. That was it. And there are a lot of bad defense in the league, so they might continue to catch a run of those. That's possible. But if Bo Nix would be a real NFL good quarterback, he's going to have to do way better than this against bad pass defenses. And he has in the past, but this defense was a little better than some of the garbage like the Carolinas of the world and the New Orleans of the world that were missing people. Anthony?
And they were also not, they were playing from a deficit, right? We don't see Bo Nix during this win streak. They haven't trailed a lot. So as bad as the Ravens secondary is, they know, okay, they need to pass. We're going to pressure this guy because their best weapon outside of Cortland Sutton, who's not that good anyway, in my opinion, is Troy Franklin. Like they don't have anything to climb out of this hole. And I get what you're saying about, I like Bo Nix more than most people, but he doesn't have enough. Like if Denver,
that's right.
If they think they're going to go make any type of a playoff run, you better be buyers at the deadline. Like, where were you when Deontay Johnson went to Baltimore?
Just what they need, another guy to get open short.
Well, I mean, is he not an upgrade over what they have?
I'm kidding, Anthony. I had to say, you know, Nick loves to throw short. That's all. That's why I said that. Oh man,
I just don't think that they were equipping him with enough.
No. I mean, look, I don't think they ever thought for a minute, and Sean Payton's been a wonderful coach for a long time. I don't think there was a minute they thought they'd walk into the season and be a great offense. I don't think they expected that. I don't think they were building an offense for this year saying we're putting a juggernaut out there. So, I mean, they probably want to reassess. Did they really know what Bo Nix was? They'll have a better picture. So if they think they could build around him, I think your point makes sense but then they would know exactly what to get him. It's one of those things where, all right, now we know we got in the cupboard. What other ingredients do we need to make the stew? So maybe that'll help them that way. But we'll see. And look, the young man's still learning the game.
Yeah.
So he could be very good. He could be very good. I mean, certainly there are a lot of quarterbacks doing worse than him right now. So there's that. All right, let's get to our instant reaction number 4. Lions dominate the Packers 24-14. It was a rainy game, foreshadowed this game. And we don't have to say much about this game. The Lions do what the Lions do. Jared Goff, 22 pass attempts. Now, this time he only got 1 touchdown. Normally, he's getting 2 or 3 touchdowns on those real low attempts. So 145 yards, he hurts you in fantasy. But the usual. Gibbs and Montgomery do their job. St. Brown does his job. And nobody else gets targets. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I thought the Packers would have been a little bit more competitive in this game, but I think it's just showing us just how good and dominant this Detroit Lions team is. And I think they might be the best team in the NFC right now. I get Washington's fun, and I like Washington. I just don't know if they can go head-to-head with Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit, man, that's a big boy team. I talked about this in the preseason, Anthony. You remember it. I said their defense would be a little better this year than they were. They didn't have to be a top 10 unit. They could just be like a top half, barely about that top 20 even. Not that bottom 5 defense. And if they were just that offense was going to benefit from that. And one thing I'll say about the Packers. Big props to Jordan Love. Playing on an injured groin on wet turf and rain. And yet he gutted it out, threw for 273. Yeah, they didn't score. They didn't score many points. They got a garbage touchdown late. Emmanuel Wilson punched one in. The game was out of hand. But look, it was a bad game for them to have on a wet field with an injured quarterback. I give Love credit for what he did. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, it was closer than, if Malik Willis was out there, I think it could have been worse because as good as Malik Willis has played, again, this is a different animal in the Detroit Lions.
All right, now our last reaction number 5. Rams beat the Seahawks in overtime, 26-20. And Charlene told us earlier, the Rams look good. Yes, they do. They do. Sean McVay, and I've been saying this for a while. I learned my lesson with Puka Nacua last year. Sean McVay will make you a superstar in his offense. Demarcus Robinson was in the league a long time and he was with Patrick Mahomes for years and did nothing. And all of a sudden we see this version of Demarcus Robinson. Puka Nacua, one of the slowest guys you'll ever see coming out of the combine. Superstar. I still wonder this day, Anthony, what Cooper Kupp would have really been had he not landed with Sean McVay. Been a good player, but would he ever had that 1,900-yard season? Would he have had a 1,400-yard season?
Yeah.
Maybe. I tend to think not. Kyron Williams putting up 100 yards of scrimmage most weeks, almost scoring a touchdown every game. Is he really the second best running back in the NFL or third best running back? Probably not. And I just cannot say enough good about Sean McVay and how he just crushes defenses. What are your thoughts?
We talk about, earlier, Mike McDaniel, and people were talking about Mike McDaniel like he was Sean McVay last season. Meanwhile, if you take away, and who knows what this McVay offense is if they lose Stafford, obviously, but if you take away some key weapons out of Mike McDaniel, we see this offense fall apart. Meanwhile, this offense did fall apart, and they did just enough without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua to tread water now to a point to where everything's back, everybody's back, and this team's on a 2-game win streak. Matthew Stafford goes for, I think he threw like maybe 3 total touchdown passes, or maybe even 1 until last week. Now he's thrown 4 or 6 in the past 2 games. I mean, this is just insanity. And now we're probably going to see the Rams make another late season run and be in the playoff conversation, if not a wild card spot, or win the division, because right now that division is 1 game, right? Everybody is split by 1 game or tied. The Cardinals are on top. The 49ers, they're not a lock.
No.
Right? They're not a lock.
No, not at all. Look, there's so many injuries on that team, and I'm not even talking about just McCaffrey. I'm talking about the defensive injuries that they've dealt with. That's been a real problem. Depth at receiver has been a problem now. No Ayuk. No, I would not say for a minute the 49ers are coming out like going to be a juggernaut coming out. They could.
I'm putting McVay, like if you ask me who the best head coaches in the NFL outside of Andy Reid, I'll put like John Harbaugh up there, but I'll take McVay over Kyle Shanahan. And I don't know if it's close for me.
No, it's not close. I don't think it's close. They both have issues, McVay's clock management and things like that. But look, Kyle Shanahan's coughed up a lot of big games by choking. And that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And so, no, I would take McVay. McVay's got a ring on his finger.
Yep.
Big difference there, right? 28-3. That was the offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan. Oh, man. Never forget that.
He had the lead on KC, too.
Before I get to the Seahawks real quick, I know the Cardinals will play an extra game over the Rams tonight, but the Cardinals are in first place all alone for today. Who would have expected that after 9 weeks? I don't think anybody.
No.
They were predicted by many to be the 4th team in the division. All right, let's talk about the Seattle side of this. I feel bad for Geno Smith. The offensive line just hemorrhages pressure. Geno was sacked 7 times, I believe. Top of my head, and I might be wrong. It might be more. I don't have the sack number for me. It was a lot. He was under pressure all day long. Could not have been worse. First half, they scored a touchdown late. There was very little scoring in the first half. And then the second half, the game got into a track meet. Jackson Smith and Jigba has the mother of second halves. 7 for $180 and 2 touchdowns on 13 targets. But Geno, look back at Geno's season. When we talk about Geno, you look at the numbers in the box scores, you're like, oh, they look good. It's funny because in the games they're competitive, he doesn't do well. It's when they're trailing. He gets a bunch of garbage time yards, and most weeks it ends up with 1 passing touchdown. It's like 1 touchdown and 320 yards. This week he did get the 3 touchdowns, so it looks much, much better. But they need to trail, and Geno just has to throw like this. It was only 34 attempts, but a heavy dose of those were in the second half. Anyway, this offense is in a lot of trouble. Kenneth Walker, again, they missed DK Metcalf. Without him spacing the field, 25 carries, only 83 yards. They really, really miss him, but they had a great, valiant comeback. Again, in overtime, in field goal range. Now it's the first drive. They want to score a touchdown, 4th and short, and they go for it, and they come up short because their offensive line couldn't get any push. Probably should have taken the field goal and taken their chances. The Rams did score a touchdown. You could have played defense a lot differently. Anthony, thoughts on the Seahawks?
Yeah, this team, the offense just looks off without DK Metcalf. And I get they put up the yards like you said yesterday, but when DK Metcalf isn't there, it just seems like you defend this team differently. Kenneth Walker can't get going, and it's almost like a trickle-down effect.
That's it. They have a bye this week. Hopefully DK comes back. Noah Fant's going to probably miss some extended time. But I worried about Ryan Grubb coming in, though, because, like I said, coaches in college only with running offenses, they're not great at making adjustments. They get schooled by NFL defensive coaches, and to a degree, even though they did a valiant comeback, we continue to see that. Anthony, let's take one question before we get out of here. Chris had a question. Somebody wants to trade him Waddle and Love for James Cook. Quarterbacks are Purdy and Darnold. I won't do it. How about you?
Waddle and Love for James Cook. I would rather have James Cook.
Yeah. I mean, Waddle is literally, that touchdown was great, salvage a day, but nothing.
He probably had less than 10 PPR points still.
Yeah, right. He did. Because he had minus yardage on the catch because it had garbage play. So I think you keep James Cook. You got Connor and Breece Hall, you said, but you're going to need a third running back. They both have buys coming up, I believe. So you're going to need a running back for both of those weeks. And then, look, I love Connor. He hasn't missed time yet, but every season's career he's missed time. You need that third running back. And Charlene, thanks for hanging with us in the kind words. All right, everybody, thanks for hanging with us. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day. For Anthony Cervino, I'm Jim Coventry, and we will talk to you soon.